should we call you defendant, or I'm not sure, is the 3rd Duke of Buckingham.
Right. Those of you who were here earlier, I'd just like to ask you to put out of your minds everything that you've heard about me. That list, he mentioned a list. Fake news. Never happened. Just forget it. I'd also like to say that I should be lodging a formal complaint. The publicity for this event refers to my head being chopped off. Not only is this prejudicial to the outcome of my case, it is also extremely upsetting for me personally, not to mention for my wife and children. I shall be claiming substantial damages for emotional trauma. And you may think this is a light-hearted affair, but I can assure you it is anything but that for me. As for the charges against me, how could anyone say that I am not deeply loyal to our gracious sovereign? Did not my father lose his head without trial for having rebelled against Richard III? Did not the late King Henry VII compensate me for my father's losses and appoint me to the Order of the Bath following his glorious succession? Was I not Lord High Constable and Lord High Steward at the present sovereign's coronation in 1509? Did I not serve loyally and valiantly in the invasion of France in 1513? I wasn't off sick with a broken leg. You may not think it to look at me now, but in my younger days, I was an accomplished jouster and was one of the judges of jousting at the Field of Cloth of Gold. Yet when I was selected a couple of years ago to joust against the king, I declined the honour for fear of harming him. Is that the act of a disloyal subject? These days I prefer tennis, and in playing the king I lost £14 to him. Does that not show loyalty? And I can tell you that his recent visit to me at Penshurst cost me well over £1,000. The charges against me are politically motivated, a witch hunt by the deep state. They are, in a word, trumped up, based on the hearsay of servants who were threatened and tortured to extract false confessions. I have a wide acquaintance and family connections. If there are some among them whose loyalty to the king is not as firm as my own, that does not mean that I should be tainted by association. To be sure, a lot of Plantagenet blood flows in my veins, but the fate of my father and my own conduct surely demonstrate that I have no wish to plunge the country back into the turmoil of those times. Perhaps some of my peers are jealous of my great wealth and resent the fact that they've not been invited to one of my famous Epiphany parties. It's possible that there might have been some talk of what might happen in the event of our sovereign's death, but this is not the same as wishing it might come about. Far from it. I have my faults, but I am aware of them and try to make amends. I'm planning to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and intend endowing a college in the church at Thornbury, my place in Gloucestershire. Which brings me to my main point. Since 1510, when I was granted by His Majesty a license to crenellate, I've been building a rather splendid castle at Thornbury. It is in many ways a tribute to the late King's Richmond Palace. It stands next to the church. It has an entrance front with a central gateway and octagonal towers at the corners. The gateway leads into a courtyard with a hall opposite the entrance. Sounds familiar? My friend Marney is attempting something similar in Essex, but in brick. Brick? What is brick? Earth, with God knows what rubbish thrown in for good measure. Something you use when you can't afford or lay your hands on anything better. My castle is built of stone and will last for 1,000 generations. Mark my words, I am setting a fashion here that will be followed for years to come. Some have described my undertaking as audacious and ambitious. Well, that sums me up pretty well. I don't mind admitting, but one can be audacious and ambitious without being disloyal to the crown. That's simply how a chap gets on. It's quite wrong to say that what I am building is of all but royal pretensions. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you're looking for royal pretensions, look closer to home. Hampton Court, dare I suggest. If I am not allowed to finish my magnum opus, it will be a tragedy for the development of taste in this country. For that reason alone, I must be allowed to complete my work. When that is done, you may do with me what you will, but I beseech you, do not send me to the Tower today.
The Marchioness of Exeter.
In transition. I appeal to you. My name is Gertrude. I am Lady Courtney, Marchioness of Exeter. And I am afraid I have been in this tower for a while. And I've been accused of heretical and treasonous behaviour. But I can tell you, it is all my husband's fault. Earl of Devon, Marquis of Exeter, Henry Courtney, was a good man. He was cousin to our Lord Henry VIII. He was, like the Duke of Buckingham, a well-known jouster and companion of the king, who served with him closely and fought bravely in the armies and jousted well at the Field of Cloth of Gold. But our religious beliefs, which I am a firm believer in the true church, seems to have led us astray. And my guilt is by association with him. I know that he lost his head because the king decided that he felt threatened by my husband. But I can tell you that we entertained the king most royally at West Horsley Place when he came on Progress. He enjoyed a marvellous dinner with us. We had venison, we had pheasant, we had stork, we had gannet, we had all the king's favourites, and fruit and wine, and it was a glorious occasion. The musicians played, we danced, we did plenty of hunting as well. That garden, though, seems to have... there's been mischief because we have been accused of harbouring the Nun of Kent, whose heretical beliefs have been trumpeted around. She did not come to our house. I mean, we wouldn't have entertained her there. And I didn't go in disguise to Kent to talk to her in Canterbury either. That was someone else. And so any sort of representations that you may have heard from the mischievous servants and the gossips who may think they overheard things going on in the garden that were treasonous were not. There was just people having a good chinwag. I am only a woman. I have no power to influence anything, but I've been driven to distraction by the grief of the death of my husband. I'm out of my mind with grief and worry that what's going to happen to my young son, William, who I need to protect. And he, he's done nothing wrong either. I mean, why should he be in the tower too? So I appeal to you out of favour for that and the immense loyalty that I've shown to all the various queens that, our sovereign has had during various, various years. I've put up with. I've served loyally with them, and I feel that this is something that just purely by association, purely because I have strong religious beliefs, and I wouldn't say that I'm a fervent believer in this new Protestantism, whatever that is, but I feel that I have been wronged, and that as a well-born lady and true servant of the crown, I should not be losing my head today. That this is something I feel strongly about, and would ask you to keep me from the problems that would otherwise come my way. So please do not chop my head off now. Thank you.
Invite Sir William Paulet to defend his neck.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, I am Sir William Paulet, and there are two reasons why you shouldn't send me to the Tower of London. The first is that I am no trouble to anyone, and the second is that I'm extremely useful. I'm no trouble because I will just work with anybody. I work quite happily with Cardinal Wolsey, that high-flying, wide-ranging prince of the church, with Thomas Cromwell, that low-born, ruthless but talented royal minister, with Henry VIII, that wonderful and yet sometimes rather unpredictable king, with Protector Somerset, that resolute, in some ways boldly reforming, but in other ways rather shouty Lord Protector, with the Duke of Northumberland, that possibly rather cynical but quite pragmatic governor of England, who only got into trouble when he tried to put his son-in-law on his son and daughter-in-law on the throne, with Queen Mary, so determined as she was to restore the religion of her youth and make things right with her Spanish husband, and now with our good Queen Elizabeth, subtle, clever, steering her way through the difficulties of European politics. I loyally served all of them, and I worked with anybody else who would work with them, from some of the quite radical Protestants serving Somerset, Northumberland and Cromwell, through to grumpy churchmen like Bishop Gardiner. And people allegedly asked me at the time, how did I manage it? And I said, going for a nice woody metaphor that works very well in this barn, I am sprung from the willow and not from the oak. So I'm no trouble to anyone. Why send me to the Tower? But there's another good reason. I am very useful. Look at the jobs that I've done in Tudor government. Master of the King's Wards from 1526, looking after the inheritances of those poor heirs and heiresses who can't look after their inheritances for themselves, to make sure that the king can protect them in their difficult circumstances, while also making a very reasonable profit out of control of their lands. Controller of the king's household, the man who has to check all the other household officers' accounts to make sure that things aren't going astray. Lord Chamberlain, President of the Council, and then the big one, Lord Treasurer, for 22 years, in charge of royal finances for 22 years. Imagine someone in your generation being Chancellor of the Exchequer for 22 years. Some of you, depending on your proclivities, may think if only Gordon or Rishi hadn't gone for the top job. But anyway, but in charge of royal finances for 22 years. And to do that effectively, I used my London connections by marriage to network with the London merchant community who understand trade, coinage, and things like that. I cleared the Crown's debts in the 1550s and 1560s, working with Thomas Gresham, that superstar intellectual of the London trading elite, the man who founded Gresham College, the Royal Exchange, and formulated Gresham's Law. I raised the customs income, regular indirect taxation on things rich people buy, rather than irregular and painful direct taxation on the incomes and the wealth of poor people. What's not to like? A tax on wine for the benefit of the wider community. And above all, I led on the stabilisation of the coinage in the 1550s and 1560s. People before me had trashed the English silver coinage. They melted it down. It went from 92.5% pure silver down to 25% pure silver. The king's nose was turning red on the coins. The exchange rates were ruined. Prices went through the roof because nobody would accept coin to pay for things. What you needed was stabilization, devalue those useless coins, make proper coins back at proper sterling value, 92.5%. We started that when I was Lord Treasurer in the 1550s. We finished it off when I was Lord Treasurer in the early 1560s. That cut inflation, that stabilised exchange rate, so important for England's international trade. It improved the king's reputation. I've heard it said people thought the king was blushing when his face turned red on his coins. Our good Queen Elizabeth's face does not turn red on her coins because they're back to proper sterling silver. And above all, stabilising the coinage helped the poor. They're the people hit hardest by debasement. Lots of people here in 16th century England talk about the common weal, the common good, what perhaps in your generation you might call society. Well, I claim I have the interests of society at heart. So in addition to not really doing the kind of thing that make me enemies, I'm also quite useful. They're the two reasons why you shouldn't send me to the Tower of London. Thank you for your attention.
A great privilege to invite Henry First Lord Marney to explain his role.
Well, first of all, welcome to my house. It's very good to see so many people here. I am in the middle of building the most magnificent house in England. There are many reasons why I shouldn't be sent to the Tower. Probably one of the most important is that I need to finish my house. So if you want to see how magnificent it can be, you need to let me live. So my background, well, I'm a behind-the-scenes man, so there is no reason that I have got into any treasonous trouble whatsoever. So I am behind the scenes, I am good at accounts, I am very diligent, but above all, I am very, very loyal to, first of all, King Henry VII, and he trusted me sufficiently that he put me in charge of his second son, Henry. Now, Henry was a bit of a wild boy. And as a child, I don't know, I mean, personally, I've got one of these myself. He's grown up now, but he gave us quite a bit of hassle as a child. And he didn't manage to finish his education. Luckily, my Prince Henry that I'm looking at now is very good and has managed to become quite a sensible child. But I know all sorts of things about Henry that he possibly wouldn't want to be let loose. So he keeps me close. When Prince Henry became king, what did he do? Well, he appointed me to 3 very important posts. The first one is that he made me captain of the Yeomen of the Guard. That's his private bodyguard. Now, you wouldn't possibly dream of sending your own personal bodyguard to the Tower because who might take his place? You can't replace me. I am the person who looks after the king. He also made me Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Now, that's a wonderful position. It just means that I can use all my very good administrative abilities and I can look after the king's lands on his behalf. Everything I do is on the king's behalf. I am, well, I'm quite wealthy, but I'm not really a rich man. I stand up to some of the nobles if I feel they need to. I'm not frightened, but I stick to the background. I just carry on very quietly doing what I should. Now, we've heard from the Duke of Buckingham. Unfortunately, I was actually the person who arrested him, and I know exactly what he's been doing. So if anybody's going to the Tower, I happen to know that it's the Duke of Buckingham. I also happen to know that if he goes to the Tower, I am going to get his lands. So that is quite a good position to be in. So if we're thinking of anybody going to the Tower, it's obviously not going to be me, because on my deathbed or at the execution on the scaffold, I might just let out some of those secrets from that young Henry. And we wouldn't want to hear those now, would we? So I think I am fairly safe. So as the background man who knows rather a lot about people, I think you should allow me to live, that I can finish this wonderful house that you've come to see.
Great honour to introduce His Majesty, King Henry VIII.
Unaccustomed as I am to plead before my people. Indeed, there was an occasion when my people, a little bit of them, sort of tried to put me on trial. They were the adjacent shire of Lincolnshire. And this is how I addressed them during the Lincolnshire Revolt. That you, the people of the most brute and beastly shire of this realm, should dare to address your sovereign as though the foot should speak to the head. Right, so you've got your orders, you know. But let me do something else. I am the only person here you've ever heard of. These are my mere creatures, dependencies, the things that hung on my every word. We've heard from Marney, who appears to have undergone a rather strange transition, but I always had my doubts about him. He accuses me of failing to complete my education. I'm not actually sure that Marney could speak Latin. I was indirectly taught by Erasmus. I encountered the greatest of European intellectual, well, not quite intellectuals, but show figures when Baldassare Castiglione came to my father's court. And there it was that I discovered, of course, what nobody seems to have talked about, which is the idea, we haven't used the word yet, of gentleman. I was the first gentleman of England, in the sense that I was both cultivated intellectually, I was also a star of the tournament and of the battlefield. We've got then here this traitorous duke. We have a man, I really can barely remember his name, Poulet. I think he did something to do with money, but you know, the one thing he failed to tell you was that he pilfered. He died one of the richest men in England, and every penny that he made for the crown, two stuck to his fingers. So, and then, what was this woman? Again, rather a curious figure, the Marchioness. Well, I have got, in many ways, rather a lot of sympathy. Because again, the Marchioness, in the state of her discombobulated mind, appeared to have forgotten her ancestry. She failed to tell you that she was actually the daughter of the man who, unlike this creature Marney, was in fact really genuinely close to me as a boy. That's Lord Mountjoy, who again acted as intermediary to Erasmus. But unfortunately, and it is sad to say, she failed to keep up with my necessary religious evolution, which of course had only very little to do with the fact that I fell in love with Anne Boleyn, and we all know that story. Right, this is the funny side. Let's now actually do the serious side for the last 2 or 3 minutes. I create you. I create your England. I am the king who changes England more than any other monarch apart from Henry VIII. Apart from William the Conqueror. I am the king who is the axis of your history. I am the king who, it has to be said, reign divides absolutely into two. We heard earlier, and we can drop now temporarily out of our personalities. We heard earlier from Stephen, from Professor Gunn, explaining the extraordinary change that comes about in the second half of Henry's reign, in the second half of my reign. In that second half of my reign, I change from what would have been the kind of king that the Duke of Buckingham would have been, that's to say, a kind of burp of the late Middle Ages, intent on victory in France. I turn into a king who almost consciously, I think, ushers in a new world and a new age. And it's a new world and a new age which produces you. The fact that I decide to make myself head of the church on, of course, absolutely wonderfully researched grounds, triggered by the fact that I'm so good at Latin, that I accumulate brilliant libraries, and so on, and have indeed think tanks that come up with all of this stuff and unimpeachable evidence to support the fact that I make myself head of the Church of England, redefines England as a nation. the English language is transformed by the Bible, that it has to be said with some doubts I permitted to be put in the English language, and the magnificent version there was a chap called Cromwell who had something to do with it, but by the time we got to the second edition, he had indeed gone to the Tower. I don't think I dismembered him, but certainly his head had been cut off, so he was scrubbed out. But essentially, that English Bible redefines the language you speak. We've heard of my daughter. I wasn't actually aware she was going to be a great queen. I thought she was only a kind of add-on, Elizabeth. And I gather you tend to think that these great transformations in the English language, a chap called, what's it, Shakespeare, the invention of blank verse and the invention of the sonnet happened then. They don't. They happen in my reign, with rather interesting creatures that I've invented, like Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey, one of them the sonnet, the other blank verse. We also redefine the very idea of England. I first see England, and I do it myself. I have it mapped. I have detailed drawings made of the whole coastline, and because, of course, I've separated from the Babylonical captivity of the monstrous creature called the Pope in Rome, whom, by the way, I spent the first half of my reign kissing his feet, but that's an entirely different matter. I learned better. That thing creates the England that we are in now, and creates the fact that you all know that the Channel is the widest strip of water, and we are different and we are better, and it's all due to me.
Well, it's decision time, and the axe is in your hands. So, if we ask the Duke of Buckingham to stand up, would those who would like to see him go to the Tower also stand up? 1, 2, 3. How many people are we allowed to send to the Tower? Only one. Only one. Oh, which makes the counting easier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got your name down. Right. And what about the good Marchioness of Exeter? Who's going to send her to the Tower? 2, 3, 4. Oh, they're coming out of the woodwork now. So, 4 are sending you to the Tower. You just got to remember the numbers, because what about Sir William Paulet? Whoa.
Just like to say Sir William Cecil's a lot more corrupt than I was.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Whoa, gosh, there's nothing like getting people's pockets empty. Yeah, I'm Henry First Lord Marney. Oh, that's yeah, we don't want any food poisoning, so that's probably a good call. And finally, His Majesty Henry VIII. Who's going to send him to the Tower? 1, 4, 5, 6. Well, Sir William, would you like to say anything before you are escorted out?
I've always done my best to serve the Tudor monarchy. It looks like I found a new way to serve it.